Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this month's episode of the ThunderCast. I got my buddy here, number one Marmaduke fan. Go ahead and say hi to everyone, Marm.
Hi, everyone. Number one Marmaduke fan. And thank you, Lio Convoy, for having me on to talk some ThunderCats.
We do what we do here. Let's see here. Making sure I got everything out properly. Everything ready to go. Haha. Good. We are good to go. Hateful Eight showing up in the chat. That's also a good thing here. Let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and shoot this link out and let everybody know that we're good to go so we can do what we do and get to discussing things.
I will do so as well.
So you guys will give us about 5 minutes here so I can do all this. We'll be good to go.
Dude, you're up to 858 subs. You and I are like neck and neck here.
Rad.
Hateful Eight and Cool Beans are with us. Cool. I'll keep an eye on the chat too.
Beans. I know these people.
Well, I finally watched that He-Man show that you recommended to me, but I've never gotten to meet your He-Man enthusiast guests yet to get their perspective on it.
I'm sure you'll run into them sooner or later. I'm really trying to get Joe and Tyler to hop on Twitter, but they're pretty resistant to it. It's Evie of the Sea.
I know her.
Ah, good.
She used to be Eve of the Renaissance, but apparently Captain Apple suggested that she modernize her screen name a bit.
I saw her on my live streams for art. That's cool. I did not know that she had changed her name. I'm in a Discord server with her and Artistic Layman.
I think I know Artistic Layman.
He's a good man.
So let's see. Let's hope I got the episodes right. It's Pumm-Ra and Wildstorm comics, right?
It's we're discussing the character Mumm-Rana. We're doing an episode discussion on Pumm-Ra since it's the 5th episode, and we're talking about the Wildstorm ThunderCats issue number 2.
Cool, yeah. Well, I really dug Pumm-Ra. I mean, I'm like the newbie ThunderCats fan on the in the room. So what I was interested in, one of the things that interested me was how they kept consistent with Mumm-Ra having a condescending attitude toward Lion-O. He called him boy a lot in the first fight, and he kept that up as Pumm-Ra, which was kind of a neat little, nod to people who had watched the earlier episode.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also kind of be interested to get your perspective because I was thinking, I make a lot of connections with Samurai Jack, and especially like when Jack disguised himself as a woman when Aku disguised himself as a woman to deceive Jack, and Mumm-Ra disguising himself as a trusted member of Thundera. You've talked a lot about the Arthurian connection. Do you have any thoughts on kind of that aspect of it, of the villain who comes in disguise?
Well, that's a pretty common trope within most fiction in general, especially when you have a character that has magical abilities.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, they adopt a disguise one way or another. But before we get into that, I have some interesting information about this episode I think you'll find fascinating. First, this is the only episode in ThunderCats that was written by Jules Bass of Rankin and Bass.
I lost a little bit of that. So I heard the part about Rankin and Bass. I missed what you said before that.
All right, I'll repeat it then, because that means the other guys probably didn't hear it either. This is the very first and only episode of ThunderCats that was written by Jules Bass.
Of the Rankin and Bass team.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So it was their studio, but they weren't that involved in many of the episodes, right?
Correct. They had input, of course. They were the directors, but this is the only episode that Jules Bass wrote.
Interesting. Do you know how involved Rankin and Bass were on the Hobbit and Return of the King animations? Did they oversee those?
I believe they did, but I think they were a little bit more hands-off in that, because that's an adaptation of previously sourced material, and this was all something in-house they developed from the ground up after the initial idea was pitched to them. And I think they always had a really big heart for kids, so they wanted to be really hands-on in both ThunderCats and Silverhawks. But a little bit more. Go ahead.
I didn't know they did Silverhawks. I've got that somewhere. Now I've got to dig that out.
Yeah, they did ThunderCats, Silverhawks, and the last show I think they did was called Tiger Sharks.
And did they do The Wind in the Willows at some point, their own adaptation of that?
I don't think so, but I could be wrong. I don't know about the entirety of the Rankin-Bass library, unfortunately.
Okay. There've been like a few versions of The Wind in the Willows, like even a Disney version, that have been very well animated. And I recall one from my childhood that had a similar design sensibility to the Hobbit cartoon, but I've never been able to track it down since I was a child. So one of the interesting things about it is it's such a great style for fantasy storytelling. I mean, maybe I'm making that connection because of the Hobbit, but they have a really craggy look to a lot of their characters. It maybe kind of gives their characters a bit of an edge that some animation studios don't quite have.
It looks like it was directed by Rankin and Jules. So yeah, it was Rankin-Bass.
Nice.
So you were right on the money. Same aesthetic, I'd imagine. Probably that one was probably done by Topcraft Animation Studios in that case, if it was that old. Actually, no, 1987. That would be a Pacific Animation Corporation via Warner Brothers. So yeah, same people who did ThunderCats. That's pretty neat. But going back to the initial topic, the interesting thing about all of this when it comes to the episodes is up until this point, every episode we have watched so far has been written by Leonard Starr, who did the treatment for the series. And here's the kicker. When you read Hear the Roar, the book on all of this, he hates this episode.
Really? The first one is the first one he didn't write?
Yes, and he hates it. He thinks it is a terrible episode, and Jules Bass, he's a terrible writer. It's actually really funny when you read it.
What were his criticisms of it?
He didn't go into any details. Then again, you got to keep in mind, Hear the Roar was published just a few years ago, I think 2012, 2013. So Leonard Starr was really old by that point. I'm surprised he remembers most of the stuff he recounts.
Wow.
So he didn't go into any specific, but he does say that he thinks the reason Silverhawks didn't do as well is because Jules Bass oversaw that on a lot higher level than he did ThunderCats.
Yeah. One way to look at it is, since we know from the beginning that it's Mumm-Ra, that takes away a bit of any element of surprise. Like, if we were kind of secretly hoping that this Pumm-Ra guy would actually be another ThunderCat and want him to be a hero, we'd identify with Lion-O a bit more because he initially wants to trust him. And we'd be hurt a bit more when that turned out to be the traitor. As it is, we're just kind of like waiting for the reveal.
Well, overall, this is honestly one of my favorite episodes, despite Leonard Starr's problems with it. I enjoyed the episode from a narrative standpoint. I enjoyed the action that went on. I enjoyed the interactions. I believe, if I'm not incorrect, this is also the episode that Jaga appears in the most, as far as an astral projection, because he shows up, I think, 3 times total.
Each time giving Lion-O counsel. And what's interesting is, yeah, that's right. There's also that great scene where Lion-O wants to infiltrate the castle, and Tigra, as the architect, understands the structure of it better. And but it's interesting how Lion-O respects Jaga. His initial response is always to take charge and want to take the lead of every aspect, but then Jaga reminding him that ingenuity is called for, not bravery and strength. He's reinforcing Tiger's perspective, and it's interesting to see how Lion-O thinks like a little kid still at this point in the series.
And I think that's interesting too, because when Tiger's like, I should go, I'm the architect, Lion-O's like, but I have the sword. Yeah. Because the Lion-O, as a little kid's mind, it's like, I have the sword, I'm the boss, I do what I want.
Yep.
But what I find interesting, especially when Tiger talks at the end of the episode, what he says is actually counter to what most people will tell you, is that first impressions are everything. Tiger says the opposite. First impressions are often wrong.
Yeah.
Which I found very interesting. That is not something you'd see in modern cartoons or even older ones. They usually don't do that far counterculture in terms of what they're being told.
Right. And I also liked the bit about, I liked how Jaga put it to Lion-O, let the facts weigh heavy on your mind. That's a neat way of expressing it. And I think it's just a good illustration that they didn't talk down to kids that much. That's it's pretty much facts don't care about your feelings, a la Ben Shapiro, but expressed in kind of more flowery language.
To a point, and the nice thing about it is the way Jaga presents the information is Jaga could have easily told Lion-O, hey, that's Mumm-Ra. Yo, yeah, that's Mumm-Ra. He could have done that, but he didn't. He wanted Lion-O to learn. He wanted Lion-O to grow. And his statement was, listen to your peers with caution. There's a reason why you should listen to your peers with caution, because just because of your peers also doesn't mean that their information is always correct. You have to come up with your own decisions here.
Now, is Jaga elsewhere? Is he able to have like the power to sense deception or something? How would Jaga know that Pumm-Ra was fake?
He just comes out of nowhere sometimes with knowledge other characters don't have.
Kind of Ben Kenobi-esque.
Oh, here's the kicker. Mumm-Ra is well aware of Jaga's existence.
Interesting.
Yeah, they touch up on that later. They did so more in the comics, but they actually have one direct encounter at one point, but that's in the second season. But here's the other thing is, not only do we establish Lion-O still being young, some more of the tech on the cat's lair, and all that, but there's also one thing in the series established very early on that kind of displaces it from other fictions in the time with a magical sword, is that Mumm-Ra's desire to get and control the Sword of Omens is ultimately thwarted because it can never do what he wants it to.
Right, and that happens almost. It's interesting how he has to learn about it. Like, he knows about the Eye of Thundera. He's 1,000 years old and he's somehow aware of it, but he doesn't understand how it functions, and then it bites him in the butt.
Yes, and it's fun to watch. There's nothing that'll get your attention more than literal lightning from the heavens coming to electrocute you. You know, a lot of people look at immortality and they're like, oh, I want that. It's like, no, you don't, because what you live through is far worse than dying.
Yep.
But you also see a lot of other things. You see all the characters inhibiting or showing off their different strengths. You see Tigra's intellect. You see Lion-O's courage. You see Panthro's absurd strength, where he lifts half the freaking thunder tank just to throw people off of it.
While the whole team is on it, and then he apologizes. I love that little bit, because at first I was thinking, why do you pick up the thunder tank while all his teammates were on it? And then he apologized, which kind of humanizes it.
But you have to understand, they touched his tank. You don't touch Panthro's tank.
Well, that's it. It's interesting because he calls it his baby in the show, right? And then in the comics, there was this whole bit where Lion-O said, "I'm sorry about your baby," and Panther says, "That's not my baby. This is my real baby." They really did a good job of picking up on some of like the peculiarities of speech in the show and bringing that into some comedic moments in the comic.
You also find out that Cheetara can run at about 120 miles an hour.
Right, but they said it in kilometers, right?
No, they actually said mile.
Okay, cool. My good old Imperial system.
Yeah, Imperial system. You don't go to the moon with kilometers.
ThunderCats are American, dang it.
Well, the interesting thing is we go further. We see that, number one, we established a lot of things here. We established that Mumm-Ra can take whatever form he wants. We saw that in Burbles as well. But you also see things from Mumm-Ra's perspective, which is also very interesting. Very rarely in cartoons back then did they establish, like, say, Skeletor's exact viewpoint in terms of He-Man. Like, you find that Skeletor, he wants to rule things. Well, why does he want to rule things? Because he's evil, of course. But Mumm-Ra's viewpoint is, this is my planet. You're unwanted here. You woke me up. You disturbed me. Yeah,
that was a very humanizing moment for him, because then it's not that you identify him to the point where you excuse what he does, but you understand it as, like, I don't like it when my noisy neighbors wake me up, and in a way, even though he's evil, that is his perspective.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, before any of this, none of the other ThunderCats had directly seen Mumm-Ra. They had Lion-O's secondhand account from him back in Unholy Alliance. You had them seeing him off to the distance, but this is the first time that front and center they see Mumm-Ra. This thing disguised as the Thunderian shows up, wrecks their place, destroys their equipment, and then turns into the 7-foot-tall demonic creature and vanishes.
Yep.
And they're like, well, what do we do? Well, we refortify the cat slayer. It's about all we can do.
Yeah. I also thought the transformation sequence was pretty smart because it can be really expensive or difficult to transform one thing into another thing. So it was first his body, and then he waved his arms over his face, and then boom, he's Mumm-Ra again, which is a kind of, it's an economical way of doing a pretty freaky transformation sequence.
Very. And it's also interesting. You see the mutants dynamic with Mumm-Ra. They're like, it's a good plan, but I don't trust him. But it is a good plan.
Yeah.
And of course, the mutants still screw it up somehow, because why wouldn't they?
Incompetence. Yeah, and they make fun of the incompetence in the comics a lot.
Well, they are pretty incompetent. But overall, what else would you say are your thoughts on this issue before we move on to the character of Mumm-Rana?
Sure. Let me think. Well, first off, the art, McGinnis, right?
Yeah. I'm saying, like, do you have any final thoughts on Pumm-Ra before we move on to the character?
Pumm-Ra, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. Let me think. Well, I really enjoyed it. Like, I think that even like the vocal characterization of Pumm-Ra was really solid. Was that the same voice actor doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he took his voice to a completely different register, almost, to be somewhat sinister but somewhat cat-like as well. So you could have read him as a completely different character, and it'd be understandable that someone wouldn't recognize him instantly. It wasn't an obvious, oh, come on, Lionel, of course that's Mumm-Ra. And what's funny is his name is Pumm-Ra, right? Like there's so many reasons it ought to be obvious, but it still works because he looks so different. And I also like the subtleness of how he tricked Chitara. Like he didn't mention where he was from at first. He made her say she was from Thundera, so it wouldn't look like he was too earnest to supply that information. So it was a great, it shows his deceptiveness really well.
Well, I think is interesting is you see a bit of Mumm-Ra's own intellect when he's looking for the sword, and he's just freaking out. It's like, it's not in their war room. It's not. Does he freaking sleep with the thing? Then he passes by the door, and you see that moment click. He just starts chuckling evilly to himself, like, they've hit it using an old Egyptian tune device. It would be safe were it not me, because, you know, I'm from that time. Ooh, I'm spooky.
Yeah, and it also shows his intelligence that he remembers the exact word of the ThunderCat roar. And he says it, thunder, thunder, thunder. So if it were not for the nature of the sword, he would have won in that moment.
Yeah, he would have. And bad things happened because he didn't win. That's the thing about, again, the thing about immortality is sooner or later you're going to find somebody who's going to be mean enough to stress test it.
Yep.
I mean, look at poor Wolverine, man. He's not even immortal, and look at the crap he goes through.
Well, he has the power of popularity on his side.
True, that is a form of immortality. But we're going to go ahead and move on real quick to the character retrospective of Mumm-Rana. Now, I don't know if you've been able to watch any of the 2 episodes with Mumm-Rana or not, so I might be flying alone on this.
I actually had not. I didn't recall. I think I remember you mentioning her last time though, but I haven't come across her yet.
It's fine. She only shows up in 2 episodes. So she shows up in the first season, and she is apparently the polar opposite of Mumm-Ra. She lives in a white pyramid in the middle of a nice forest plain. She calls on the ancient spirits of good. She gets mind manipulated by Mumm-Ra to banish the ThunderCats and seal the Sword of Omens because it's not going to attack her because she's not a villain. And I find the character interesting. My issue with the character is it kind of breaks some of the established lore at that point. Because the lore is that Mumm-Ra has reigned over Third Earth for centuries, unchallenged, because nobody's been able to rise up against him. But here we have a character who technically is equally as powerful as him.
Right.
And she's been here this whole time and has never been acknowledged. And it kind of breaks that to me. And you're right, Scary. It is very underdeveloped. Go ahead.
It is interesting how they'll have like other villains show up who seem like they have a lot of interesting potential, and then I'll ask you what else they did with them, and it was just that one episode they had this interesting character show up. Yeah, and Mumm-Rana is that does kind of like strain a bit, like the naming conventions. Like the naming conventions is already like a little bit silly. Like it's lion plus O, and that one is clearly, well, Mumm-Ra. Let's add a nut at the end. That makes it a girl.
Real quick, I'm gonna address the chat. Storm Blitz, the remake was in 2011, It got canceled due to Warner Brothers' obsession with budget, poor decisions they had made in the toy line, and Lego kind of cutting their nuts out from under them. Jeremy Soffin, we were talking about Pumm-Ra, now we're talking about the character of Mumm-Rana. And you're right, Scary Harpy, they hadn't met until the first episode. So you have these two characters occupying the same planet. One is the epitome of evil, one's the epitome of good, and they've never met, never conflicted. That is so bizarre. And yes, Mumm-Rana is also a mummy. Not as ugly as Mumm-Ra, though.
Because she's good.
Absolutely.
That is a great fantasy archetype, though. How do you know that she's the good guy? Well, she's beautiful.
Well, the interesting thing is it actually gets subverted in an episode of ThunderCats. It's very fascinating.
Interesting.
Yeah, that episode's name is actually Good and Ugly.
Okay. Like the good, the bad, and the ugly.
I can't remember if they were intentionally making that reference or if they just thought it'd be clever to name it Good and Ugly. But the interesting thing is, and now let me pull out the show notes here about Mumm-Rana, because what they say about her is a lot deeper than they actually got into about her.
Interesting. Do you know if she's made use of it all in the comic series?
Not at all. Not even once. And I'm going to touch on that in a minute here, but let me read this out. Appearing twice in the ThunderCats saga, Mumm-Rana represents the antithesis of Mumm-Ra and gains her powers from the ancient spirits of goodness. Residing in a white pyramid, she is similar to her counterpart in that she is ancient and weak when rested, but returns to her past form when using her magical powers. In her opening story, Mumm-Rana, she is temporarily transformed by Mumm-Ra into a force for evil, before regaining her freedom and assisting the ThunderCats in foiling Mumm-Ra's plans. She next appears in her second episode, Mumm-Rana's Belt, which is revealed that she defeated Luna's grandmother, Queen Luna, generations previously and became the guardian of her belt. Dr. Robert Cuises, which is the psychological director for children on the show, addressed the comparisons between Mumm-Rana and Mumm-Ra in his analysis of her opening adventure. Quote, good and evil are indeed opposites, and Mumm-Rana and Mumm-Ra represent their characteristics in this episode. The peace and serenity of Mumm-Rana contrasted with the estrangement and self-hatred of Mumm-Ra. Evil may at times seem more powerful than good because it is ruthless and plays by its own rules, and not the accepted rules of a moral code. It may even set aside goodness for a time. But in the overall scheme of reality, good is stronger and its effects more powerful. Human nature has a basic propensity for wholeness and to be in peace and harmony with itself, rather than fragmented and alienated. When it responds to goodness, our nature is strong and secure, full of the power that comes from self-respect. The sense of wholeness and fulfillment is a stronger attraction ultimately than the effects of evil, which breeds only disrespect. Should we commit ourselves, like Lion-O and Mumm-Rana, to alignment with the course of goodness, in doing so, we will receive the highest reward, self-respect.
So he's basically identifying her and Mumm-Ra as very straightforward good and evil symbolic archetypes, pretty much.
Pretty much. And I like the little spiel he went on there about, and I don't know if he's still around, but if he is, I'd love to get him on the show sometime. Real quick here, Jeremy Soffin. Mumm-Rana is in one episode of season 2. My favorite villain from ThunderCats, honestly, Stormblitz, would be Mumm-Ra, simply because of what he is. But outside of that, I think Mongor is an interesting villain, although only used once. But here's the thing, and I'm going to be addressing this when I cover the rest of the ThunderCats He-Man crossover. There's an instance where He-Man dies because he got ran through as Prince Adam. And Lion-O has to try to find a way to revive him. So because these comic writers didn't do their research about anything ThunderCats related for the most part, he takes He-Man's body to Mumm-Ra's pyramid and sticks him in Mumm-Ra's tomb. Like, it is the dumbest idea. And he even addresses it. And they never once thought about anything else that could have done the job without reverting to Mumm-Ra's pyramid like a complete moron.
I mean, these fantasy worlds are such that you could just come up with like a Lazarus pit, like out of Batman, and then it gets destroyed. So that way you have the convenient excuse for why don't they use it later? Well, it got destroyed in our one special crossover. episode. Come on, make something up.
I've got better. I've got you better. ThunderCats has a Well of Youth. It has the Thunder, or not the Thunderscope, the Totem of Dara, which can heal people. It's got Mumm-Rana's Pyramid, which you could easily have just taken him to Mumm-Rana and say, hey, can we do anything here? And here's the other thing. He could have just used the Sword of Omens because it has brought people back from the near brink of death before, too. Yeah. It's almost like these guys didn't do a lick of research when they wrote the book.
They just phoned it in.
I think it's beyond phoned it in. I think they just did a quick Google search, said that looks good, and just typed it out.
Yeah. That's one of the things that's annoyed me about some contemporary comics is a lot of these characters have a history and an established personality. So even if you just like read the Wikipedia page on them to get their basic history, you don't have a feel for what makes them tick, you know? And when you have a lot of love for the source material, that shows up because you can sort of like pick up on the voice of the original authors.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here's the thing, EV of the Sea. I don't even think they looked at the ThunderCats wiki because it's kind of garbage. Nobody takes care of that thing the way it should be. I really need to start making that a project of mine. I need to create my own ThunderCat stuff, but blackjack and hookers.
I mean, that would make sense, as you know, like the internet's #1 ThunderCats podcast that you're heavily involved on the ThunderCats wiki.
Oh, the irony is I actually just started a ThunderCats Discord group.
Nice. Is it the internet's #1 ThunderCats Discord group?
I think it might be the only one. So yes, by default it would be.
You're #1.
I am also the #1 ThunderCats podcast.
And the #1 ThunderCats fan.
Jeremy, I am aware. I just don't care. Lily can do whatever she wants. That's not my problem.
Lily Pete?
Yes. Lily Orchard apparently showed 3 of my videos, thumbnails, in one of her videos complaining about people that are upset over cartoon reboots. And I mean, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to start an entire blog where I just do nothing but yell at Lily? I have too much to do. I don't have time for that.
Yeah. Good grief.
Moving on.
I was never even involved in like My Little Pony analysis YouTube, but I would still hear drama about Lily Pete showing up on my subscription feed from time to time.
I'm sure you would. But moving on. I don't want to get into that right now.
No drama.
Well, I'm good with drama, just not this drama. No, it's okay, Jeremy. I understand, but I've had it brought to my attention so many times. Like, I knew when it happened. But moving on, since I know you don't have much else to put out concerning Mumm-Rana, since you're not very well aware of her, you haven't seen anything with her, we're going to go ahead and move on to Wildstorm ThunderCats #2. Go ahead and start with your thoughts.
When we talked about the previous issue, I said that McGinnis's art is absolutely fabulous. I love how the Thunder Kittens are cute. I love how the full-grown ThunderCats are like chiseled out of solid marble. They look so good. And so far, I'm really impressed with the scripts as well. They're bringing in sort of the flavor and the tone of the cartoon series, and they are. It's a similar thing where they're not condescending to children, while they're still telling simple adventure stories. Mm-hmm. And I thought that Tigra came across as really cool in this episode. I feel like they wanted him to be kind of the guest star of this one, so they give him a lot of really cool scenes.
Now, how far have you gotten in the ThunderCats cartoon so far?
I think I'm still like halfway through season 1. I was watching like one episode a week, and then work started, so I got you. Yeah, but let me think. I can't recall what episode I've left off on. Okay,
have you ran into the character Hachiman yet?
I haven't, but I did see him. I did see him appear in this issue, of course, and he comes across as really cool, really masculine, and very interested in honor.
Okay, here's something really interesting. I'm going to answer Stormblitz here real quick. What powers and weapons would you like to have for ThunderCat? Just the Claw Shield and the Sword of Omens. I don't need literally anything else except for maybe the Thunder Tank, because as an adult, that's a need, not a want. I need a Thunder Tank because traffic's a pain in the butt. Moving on, Hachiman appears in the first season of ThunderCats because Mumm-Ra summons him. Because the mutants are complaining that Lion-O he's got the Sword of Omens and he's too good with it. And Mumm-Ra goes on a tangent about how, well, fine, you want a sword? Here's a sword. And he shows Hachiman's sword, the Thunder Cutter, Kankairi, and he summons Hachiman to kill Lion-O. what happens is he teleports Hachiman to his pyramid, weaves him this giant sob story about how the ThunderCats are alien invaders and they oppress my darling mutant friends, and we need someone to defeat him. Could you save us from him, great powerful samurai Hachiman? And the interesting thing,
and that becomes a deception to pit the two against each other.
It's not just a deception. It's Hachiman is so stereotypically samurai. It's hilarious. When he shows up, he swings his sword around so everybody leaves him alone, sheathes it, and immediately asks, after Mumm-Ra gives him this glowing introduction, asks, what is this place and who are these foreigners? And he threatens Slythe with his sword. It is one of the best episodes of the series. So, of course, Mumm-Ra gives him, like, I will give you this and that. And Hachiman is like, I do not need any of that. I only fight for honor against evil. So he sets Hachiman on this task. And Lion-O is helping the Warrior Maiden set up some sort of early defense system against the mutants that'll go off and let the entire village know that they're attacking. And Lion-O and Hachiman are trying to cross something called the 4-day drop. Well, because they're both hot-headed men, they decide that they should pass first. So they get into a conflict where they both start cutting pieces off the log or the tree they're trying to walk across.
Yeah.
Because neither of them are going to back down. Hachiman thinks Lion-O should back down because I'm your elder. You should yield to you. You should yield to your elder, youth. And Lion-O's like, well, you should yield to me because I started to cross first. Because I know you read manga, you're going to love Hachiman.
Yeah. It also reminds me, since you've talked about, primal archetypes for this, it reminds me of Little John and Robin Hood meeting on the bridge. Neither one of them wants to back up, so they decide to fight for it.
Well, it gets even funnier because you find out there's only a few characters in this series that Mumm-Ra himself is afraid of. Huh. There's his bosses, the ancient spirits of evil, of course. There's the guardian of the Book of Omens. And there's Hachiman. He's not afraid of Lion-O, but he's afraid of Hachiman. And the reason why he's afraid of Hachiman is because Hachiman shows up and he does business. So you find an episode later, and that's what the episode they're referencing in the comic is. It's called the Jade Dragon. What happens is Mumm-Ra takes the Jade Dragon from the Treasure of Thundera. And it gets wild. Like, you're going to have to watch that episode, but uses it against Lion-O and Chitara. And because Hachiman had a vision that was going to happen, because Hachiman lives on a planet called the Planet of the Rising Sun. He has this vision that Lion-O and Chitara are in danger. He puts his yoroi, his armor on, hops on his mechanical steed, rips a tree branch off the tree, and flies into space to go save them. Completely forgets his sword at home, right? So he's coming to New Thundera, riding his steed, when Mumm-Ra's he winds up revealing he has a pet dog later on that can transform as well. And it's this giant demonic bat creature he transforms into. And he attacks Hachiman and rips his mechanical steed apart. And Hachiman is having none of this. So Hachiman jumps on this dog's back and chokes this giant demonic bat dog out with his giant biceps. It is so hilariously amazing. You could tell they had so much fun. Like, Hachiman is like the macho masculine archetype for ThunderCats.
Yeah. I really appreciate storytelling styles that mix and match lots of genres. Like, you can tell they just wanted to do a samurai episode, right? Because it's almost like they're thinking about these characters like your awesome toys, and you just want to come up with adventures for your awesome toys, which has, like these crazy over the top plots, but then it also has all these great setups for a wide variety of characters where it makes sense for a Hachiman to exist in a universe like ThunderCats.
Yeah. But Hachiman's purpose in his initial thing was to show that you can have two different viewpoints in life, because Hachiman's is, I have to submit to my honor. I have to do what I have given my word I will do. And Lion-O's like, that's kind of silly, but whatever. That's when the cultural exchange to where you realize there's more than one way to live life. Mm-hmm. And that's what I found interesting there. But when it comes back to the Jade Dragon, Hachiman realizes Lion-O and Chitara have been trapped. His vision came true. So he calls upon the power of his ancestors. And they give him this rad armor. And he just shows up in Mumm-Ra's pyramid, blows his cauldron up, and doesn't sit there and postulate, doesn't go on a speech. He just literally says, "You know me, bad man. I am Hachiman," and goes. He is trying to actively kill Mumm-Ra.
Yeah, which the ThunderCats clearly don't do. It's clearly part of me wonders, well, is it because it's like a kids show and they're not allowed to kill people, so they kind of like skirt around that? I think. Would you say it's right that in the context of their universe, the ThunderCats don't kill their enemies?
No, they generally don't, and that's the thing that makes Hachiman so fearful. Number one, to Mumm-Ra, even though he can't really kill Mumm-Ra, that's still unpleasant. And you'll find in the episode Thundercutter, he wants to kill Slythe too. Like there's an instance where he's just like, you know what, let me kill this guy. And I was like, no, we can use him as a hostage. And Hachiman relents, because why wouldn't he? But that's what Hachiman's referring to here when he's talking about his fight with Mumm-Ra. So what happens in this is we see them travel to try to find something to help Hachiman's father. Hachiman is very much so about his family. He's about his clan. He's about his life. So you see this interesting interaction between the ThunderCats and Hachiman, because they're all friends at this point, really good long-term friends. And if you'll even see this in the comic, where Hachiman just gets a hold of one of the mutants, like, you tell Mumm-Ra, if my father dies because of his insolence, I will be back for vengeance.
Yeah. And it's you read it as a legitimate threat, and it's good comic writing, because for someone who hasn't seen the show, it's communicated to you in the flashback that he is someone who's capable of beating up Mumm-Ra in a sword fight. So it is cool to see a character with that more like warlike mentality than the ThunderCats.
Well, here's a fun fact for you. Are you aware that Hachiman is the same age as Mumm-Ra?
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, it's wild. Like, they get crazy in the second season. You really got to power through it. It's really good. But I love Ed McGuinness's art. Love it. I like how he does fight scenes. I like how he sculpts the characters, as you would say, like they're made of granite or marble. And I like the fact that they add in the proper lore and the proper backstories. They clearly did their research in this first 5-part series. So I can't recommend Wildstorm issue 2 enough. I really can't. It is a fantastic book. I like all the different shout outs. I especially like that instance when Lion-O's like, or somebody says, Lion, I thought you took care of the mutants. I thought I did too. Did you see them on the sides of the feliner? That was great.
Yeah.
Real quick, Eevee of the Sea. No, there is no holiday episode of any ThunderCats cartoon. Not for Thanksgiving, not for Christmas, and not for Halloween.
They don't even do like a fake like Thundermist or something like that.
They did in the comics in the UK.
Yes, I want to find that UK comic now. I love fake Christmas holiday special.
So that link I sent you on Twitter, my Twitter exclusive story, actually talks a little bit about that. But let's see here. Have you thought of doing an episode by episode retrospective? Well, technically, that's what we're doing right now. We're on episode 5 right now. We're going to be doing episode 6 next month. Sofa B, here's a hot take: Bing Dolly's death and return. Yes, Sofa, I agree, and that's one reason why I don't like the return. But we will get to the return after we're done with this 5-parter. So we got 3 more books to go here. But no, I really enjoyed this issue as well. There's one issue of the 5-part Reclaiming Thundera I really didn't care for due to art direction. But Ed McGuinness, I eat his work up. I really do.
He's a consummate professional. And I mean, I've been reading Squirrel Girl recently, trying to think about what's wrong with it. And one of the things I figured out about Ed McGuinness is that he'll use realism and he'll use cartooning, both to solid effect. So, when it's like a hyper, muscular figure, then he's pushing his realism. But when it's one of the Thunder Kittens, or when it's an expression, he'll push the cartooning, and it gives it a really human quality beyond just like looking really cool and like, oh boy, guys with big muscle. He really gets it. Even like Panthro, like he pushed Panthro's expressions when he was having a conversation with the Thunder Kittens, and that helps because when Panthro talks in the show, he's kind of got some sass in the way he talks about things. So in the visual medium, you need to pump up the expressions to convey that.
Yeah, and I really I know I keep saying this, but the way Ed does his artwork, especially when it comes to individual characters, is they're proportionately proper. I don't at any point look at these characters and say, "Man, that arm is way too big." And when he draws the women, especially in ThunderCats, like I never look at Chitara and say, "Man, what is going on with her hip to waist ratio? That is absurd." I don't see him sexualizing any of the characters. I see the way he does his art as just doing characters, and I really appreciate that. And the colorist for this issue is fantastic too.
Now, maybe in contrast to, was it Sean Campbell? Is that right?
Okay, Scott Campbell. Scott Campbell.
Scott Campbell. Yeah, he gave Lion-O some booty shorts. So at least he's kind of equal opportunity in his sexualizing of the characters. But Ed is definitely going for like straight, beautiful, but not. He's not like teasing the audience with like boobs and butts.
And that's one reason why I like it.
I didn't know John Layman was the letterer for this. I only just noticed that when I looked at the notes I took on this issue. He gets mentioned a lot in sort of comics Twitter drama. I know he wrote one of the comics we talked about earlier, but I didn't know he was a letterist too.
Is that when you read the enemies at Pride or something like that? The
yeah, like
Enemies Pride. Yeah,
Enemies Pride. Yeah, we read Enemies Pride and Villains and Heroes, and I didn't like Enemies Pride. The art was okay, but not quite up to Ed McGuinness. The story had okay moments, but that was the one where I thought I didn't like it because it looked like he was just kicking around Snarf because he hated Snarf. Yeah.
Speaking of sexualizing things, we got people in the chat sexualizing Lion-O. You people worry me. Oh, we got Couch Boys, the person who won the grand prize, I believe, for the ThunderCats contest earlier.
Nice.
So I'll be getting those comics out by the end of this week. Same with everybody else. And oddly enough, our boy Neko Boy gave me a good idea for the next contest to run for the ThunderCats annuals. He thinks I should do a contest where people do their own redesign of the ThunderCat characters and see what we get out of it.
That's interesting. Yeah. I've had Neko Boy on as a guest, so he's an interesting guy too. There's a lot of music, and occasionally we'll do like a little anime discussion too.
Yeah, he is really interesting. Let's go ahead and field questions from the staff, from the chat here. Anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns concerning this this point of conversation right now?
Well, I saw a lot of talk about the booty shorts, and I saw that Evie of the Sea asked, other than the art, and I'm not 100% sure what that's in reference to. Maybe she was asking if we had any thoughts on the comic other than our thoughts on the art.
Maybe. Well, my thoughts are mostly that I enjoyed the writing. I enjoyed the callbacks. I like the fact that the personalities were done very well. So I think we had a lot of thoughts.
Yeah, and what's kind of interesting is since I'm such a newbie, right? I'm a noob. That means I get to give a perspective of someone who might not have been a ThunderCats fan for a long time, and I really appreciate how they catch me up on some of the stuff. They give me just enough information about like the previous episodes and appearances that I can have context to kind of get the feel for the characters that they're bringing back, and that's really good writing because then it sort of lights the fire under you to say, oh, now I got to go check out the first appearance of these characters. It's great writing, even for like the first time ThunderCats fan as well. Oh, they gave Bengali a Game Boy Advance in one panel. That was in the Enemy Mine one. That was a little goofy.
Did I see the new She-Ra trailer? Yes, I did.
A new trailer.
Jeremy Soffin, in what contest of redesigning Thunder will I get banned for sending? You would not get banned for sending a fan art of ThunderCats. However, just for anybody who is curious, if you want to see any of your art featured, like if you do art of a rebooted 80s cartoon or you did art of the original 80s cartoons, any of them, by the way, just put it on Twitter or Tumblr with the tag Lio feature my art, and I'll throw it up at the end of one of my videos and give you credit for it.
Nice. I love art appreciation. I gotta incorporate that into my channel. Thanks for the idea.
That's what I'm here for. I'm here for dank maymays about ThunderCats, talking about cartoons, and occasionally making people very, very, very angry at me.
Okay, Evie of the Sea clarified. She wanted me to. Because I mentioned Squirrel Girl. She asked what I didn't like about Squirrel Girl. I feel like that'd be a little off topic, but let's just put it that on art and story, Squirrel Girl is the inferior to everything I've seen from ThunderCats so far. Even like the episodes I don't like as much, they're still miles ahead of Squirrel Girl.
All right, and real quick to Metamorphosis, I did see the new She-Ra trailer. I have my own views of it, but I think I'll wait to discuss that maybe if I do a video on it. And I say maybe if I do a video simply because last time when I did my latest video, my review of the ThunderCats He-Man issue 1, I had to fight through 2 copyright claims on it, and I'm still waiting to hear back from DreamWorks about it. Gosh. And I really do not feel like fighting these clowns anytime I show anything from their property on my reviews. You're
really giving them free advertising. Even if you're making fun of their thing, you're still like talking about their thing. And most of the time they say like any news is good news in media.
But I'll tell you what, here's my thoughts directly. I think their direction's interesting. I don't care for some of the character redesigns, not for the same reason other people do. I don't care for some of the character redesigns because I think they're too far removed from their originals, and they don't even pass the squint test. She-Ra herself, at least to me, passes the squint test. Some of them just, they don't. I take a look at Frosta, completely different character from the original. There's nothing that catches my eye that makes me think that's who it was. Just for reference, what is your job? Does the work pick up? Mine does, because I deliver coffee for a living. Hey, Jam.
Does the work pick up during the winter? Yeah. You're cutting out a little bit, Lio. I was just going to mention, for people who are interested in your perspective on She-Ra, we actually had a whole no holds barred blood battle, rip our throats out debate over the She-Ra design on your channel. So they should go check that out too.
They should. They should also check out when I tear into the quartering, because even if I find out that this show is nothing but political propaganda, I still say he's wrong. Because he didn't know what he was talking about.
Yeah. You are a very independent thinker in the YouTube world, because you're not an SJW, but you also don't you're not too quick to hop on every anti-SJW bandwagon, which I appreciate. You can't get mad about everything in life, or you never relax.
Well, here's my philosophy. If I'm gonna hitch myself to a wagon, I'm gonna make sure that horse isn't gonna drag me through the streets beforehand.
Right.
So that's why I am very thought out, very meticulous in trying to give my opinion on things. Because the last thing I want is to directly back some clown that are like, oh, I like this guy's ideas. I like what he says. I completely back this guy, and he says something completely vile. And then I look like a giant fool for supporting him. That's just not how I roll.
And YouTube doesn't reward that, because there's a strong element of you got to get out there fast for YouTube. Now, you and I both benefited when, ThunderCats Roar. Everybody was interested in talking about ThunderCats Roar, and we both just happened to have videos out on it. That I kind of tripped and fell into, YouTube algorithm magic land. But I'm not that interested in throwing a half-baked idea out there before I've, thought about it, just to try to cash in on, what's hot at the moment. I think YouTube, really, you have to be passionate about what you say, and you have to be thoughtful about what you say, or you're going to burn out just hoping for, clicks, views, and subs.
Mm-hmm. Real quick, I want to address the chat here. DreamWorks stepping in on comics. They had very little to do with by Stun CG&D. With DreamWorks, and I think I need to explain how this works. DreamWorks owns the rights to She-Ra as a cartoon. What they've done is what a lot of independent studios did, is they got a hold of an original creator and said, hey, I want you to conceptualize a new She-Ra and then get back to us. That's how a lot of things are produced in-house at this point in terms of conceptualization. Very rarely do cartoons and studios go outside of their normal reigns to bring something in now. Now let's see here. I hate there's no shading on the characters in She-Ra. I do want to touch on that too. And Jeremy, I do like some of the new designs. I will say that. But Evie of the Sea, I think I need to explain something here just real quick if I can, because we still got a little bit of time left here. Back in the 80s and 90s, you could throw a lot of money at cartoon animation. Like She-Ra, the original She-Ra. When you price it out, in the 1980s, it was about $120,000 per episode. So that's about $350 in modern times. However, after 1996, due to government regulation, it kind of killed the animation industry in the West in terms of television animation. So now you can't really produce a cartoon, especially one that doesn't have a massive media behind it, for the same price you could way back in the day. So they have to be very penny pinching about things. And that's why you don't see a lot of shading in the new She-Ra. You didn't see very much of it in the old one either. Now, I believe in the old one, that wasn't just a term or just a manner of price watching, because Lou Scheimer very much so did do that. But I think it's also for dramatic effect. If you see in the original He-Man cartoon, there were very few episodes that had a lot of heavy shading. One of the most important ones was the problem with power. And it was given that higher budget due to the emphasis of what was going on in the plot. And if you have not seen it yet, go to YouTube, type in the problem with power, He-Man. There is an episode up, fully legal, completely backed by DreamWorks, and you can watch it. It's a fantastic He-Man episode. How many of them were teenage girls? Yes, unique, fantastic. That was a quote of mine. Who is my favorite character other than the main character and villain? I did like the Snowman of Hook Mountain, who I believe was mentioned earlier as a Night Lion-O-Fod. I like his gusto. I like the fact that he's your stereotypical Russian character.
Yeah, I think I did see that one.
Yeah, Jeb Jam, you missed most of the podcast, but don't worry, I'll be putting it up later. Do I think of the art of mecha design and animation? Okay. I love Gao Gai Gar, the King of Braves, Gao Gai Gar. It is by far my favorite mecha cartoon. And if you have not seen it, you need to see it. Now let's see, put Shrek in. I'm not dignifying that. All right. Any other thing you want to cover here, Marm, while we wait for them to ask any more questions?
I was just Googling Gal Gai Gar. Yeah, I know you're an anime fan too. So Mecha is like the one kind of like genre of anime I haven't gotten into yet, but I want to get into it because I just have mad respect for anyone who can draw something that complicated that many times.
Well, Gao Gai Gar is the one thing I recommended to you after you had that bad manga experience to cleanse your palate, along with Baki the Grappler.
Let's screenshot it, and then once it's on my desktop, then I don't forget to check it out.
Well, here's a question for you, Marmaduke. Have you ever played Ocarina of Time?
Yes.
Okay, the voice actor for Link is the same guy who does the main character in Gao Gai Gar.
Nice. That'll be interesting. I wonder if there are memes like taking scenes from that and then like putting it over to Link animation or something. Because
I don't think there is, simply because, like, how do I put this? All the things you've liked from ThunderCats in terms of embracing the madness and the absurdity is in Gao Gai Gar.
Oh, goody. Do you know Axe Cop?
I am aware of Axe Cop.
All right. That same vibe. Like, kids can be very creative, and that's something I worked in. I worked as a tutor, so I have a huge appreciation for kids' stories, and I really appreciate it when like adults write stories that really tap into that childlike creative potential. It's like the difference between being childlike and childish is that if you're childlike, you appreciate how children think and how children imagine. If you're childish, you're just condescending and like fart jokes.
Now, real quick. Gao Gai Gar is crazy, but it addresses some of the bizarre things. I mean, you probably watch Power Rangers. You ever thought, man, there's a lot of collateral damage when these giant robots fight. Maybe they shouldn't do that in the middle of the city, right? I
was not allowed to watch Power Rangers because my parents thought it was satanic.
Okay, so maybe that's out of the range here.
And I never caught up with it as an adult.
You don't have to worry about it. But in general, you see giant robots fight. That's one of your thoughts as an adult, right?
Yeah.
Or even as a little kid. Gao Gai Gar addresses that in the most absurd way possible. You see, Gao Gai Gar doesn't have guns. He doesn't have a giant sword. Gao Gai Gar's weapons are literal tools. So he's given something called the dividing driver. It is a giant screwdriver that he drives into the ground, punches, and it creates a giant rumble pit that's a dimensional vortex.
Meaning they minimize collateral damage.
They neutralize collateral damage.
That's good.
Let's see here. You really need to check it out, but not before we get off topic here. Evie, who is my top tier cat waifu, my wife. She is the kitty queen. That is my top tier waifu.
Good answer.
Let's see. Any 80s anime you like, Fist of the North Star, immediately. Let's see here. Jeremy Soffin. Question for Marm. Go ahead, Marmaduke. Take it away.
Okie dokie. Let me find it. Where is it? I didn't find it.
Jeremy Soffin, he says, I'll read it out for you. Question for Marmaduke. Do you think, from what you've seen so far, you would have watched ThunderCats over the other things on air when you were a kid?
I definitely would have watched it. I don't know if I would have replaced my other cartoons with ThunderCats, but I definitely would have appreciated it. I mean, I was a very typical little boy where I liked good guys smashing into bad guys, and ThunderCats has that in spades. And I think I first started thinking seriously about cartoons when I was like 13, because like that was when I was starting to like try to write stuff. And I remember like being given, Oliver Twist and told to read that, and I enjoyed it. So after I kind of like read Oliver Twist and Lord of the Rings, I started thinking about cartoons a little more, and I'm sure I would have like appreciated the themes of a coming of age story as a young adult. And the thing is, it's so good that I can come to it as a fully grown adult and sort of see it with fresh eyes still. I can connect it with things that did touch me in a meaningful way when I was a young person. And it's great because it sort of introduces you to a world where if you have things you like, you immediately start connecting it with the things you've liked in the past. And that gives you extra appreciation for the older thing.
Awesome. Now let's see here real quick and address some more chat things here. This is off topic. I've not heard of that manga. Real quick. Why there? Okay, here's why there aren't any mech cartoons in the West, and that addressed by also XLR, which is great, and Sym-Bionic Titan. Those are actually two reasons why there's not many. Technically, by conceptualization, the new Voltron is a Western mech cartoon. Although it's animated in Korea by Studio Mir, it's written and directed here in the West. So technically that is one. But the reason most people don't tend to push that is because of Megas XLR and Sym-Bionic Titan. Well, Megas XLR was a great cartoon. I do love it. I love giant robots. Financially, it was a disaster. It was actually put in Cartoon Network's, how do I put this? They're not allowed to sell it. They're not allowed to put it on DVD. It was considered a tax write-off. It was that much of a bomb.
Wow.
Sym-Bionic Titan suffered twofold. Number one, they never got a toy line out in time during the series airing. And two, I think Giddy Turtikoski just kind of has ADHD and just sort of wandered off into the woods. Jeb Jam, Power Rangers equals satanic. Okay, you say that. But in the 90s, right near the end of the Satanic Panic, that was something that was actively being taught. I remember I had one guy in a church I attended at the time tell me that Power Rangers are satanic because their power source does not come from God, and anything that is not of God is against God. And then he got into his big Ford truck and drove away, and I kind of laughed. Let's see here. Yes, it was a good show. My favorite. Okay. I love Big O. That's a half and half job, much like ThunderCats is. Let's see here. Marmaduke. Okay, Marmaduke, what is your answer for your top tier cat waifu?
Well, I'm an eligible bachelor, so I don't get to do something like really sweet like you do. I guess the technical definition of waifu is it's the fictional character that you like the most. And I mean this in like an innocent context. I don't mean this in like a kind of like a pervy way or a sexual way. But boy, I mean, I guess it's that manga. I've been making fun of myself because I've been in the bad habit of anytime I review a manga, I accidentally start talking about From Far Away by Kyoko Hikawa because I'm so obsessed with what a good writer she is. So I think that would have to qualify for waifu status because I accidentally mention it every time I'm supposed to review something else.
Let's see here. Putting something in here real quick. I'm going to be making fun of you a bit on Twitter.
Well, okay. Evie's talking about what happened to Genndy Tartakovsky. He went into big time animation with like Sony, and good for him. The only reason he got to do Samurai Jack is he wanted to do Popeye, and that went into production hell, so he didn't get to do Popeye. And I was sad because he looked like he was really going to resurrect the spirit. I love the character of Popeye, and it looked like Genndy completely understood what the point of the character was. But because that got canceled, that's what allowed him to come back to Samurai Jack finally.
Well, the shows the movie he was involved with was, I believe, Hotel Transylvania.
Yes, and Hotel Transylvania is a movie that, like, if I'm stuck on a long airplane ride, I will watch Hotel Transylvania on silent and just sort of like pay attention to how his characters move. That I think Genndy Tartakovsky kind of like single-handedly made Hotel Transylvania from a completely forgettable cartoon into a very memorable and fun cartoon.
I have yet to see it, oddly enough. My sister keeps telling me I need to, because my sister is also a type of nerd. Let's see here. Let's see. Dexter's Lab, so Power. They don't count as mech shows, but they count as shows that have mechs in them. Let's see here. MLP was made by the what? Okay, there are some nuts on YouTube you really ought to check out. They are pretty funny. Let's see. Question for both Lion and Marmaduke. What show from your childhood could benefit from being remade in a new style of cartoons?
And this was for you and me, actually.
Yeah. So go ahead and answer first. I'll give you my answer.
Well, okay, the new style of cartoons. So, I mean, people call it the CalArt style, and I've heard some people argue that's not entirely correct, that it's better to call it like the Cartoon Network style. I don't hate the Cartoon Network style. I just don't like it when everything has to be the new Adventure Time, Steven Universe style, because I think it's important for an industry to have like varieties of styles. That's how you get like, that's how you can like push a style and maybe push it too far, but maybe the weird style works for a certain kind of cartoon. So I think that I don't want to see a bunch of old shows continually being remade in the Steven Universe Adventure Time style. I'd like them to be reinterpreted. I'd like them to be reimagined and thought of in a different way. I'm kind of at the point where I'm ready to say Adventure Time, it did its own thing. It was innovative for its time, and I want to see someone push the envelope in a new direction a bit. And for most, especially for revamps of classic shows. What are your thoughts, Lyle?
I think if there was a cartoon from my childhood that would work fairly well in the modern style, it'd probably be Angry Beavers.
On Nickelodeon, right?
Yeah.
Was Doug TenNapel involved in that? Okay, Doug TenNapel was involved in Cat Scratch. I don't know if he was involved in Angry Beavers.
He was not, and he and I don't get along. So.
Oh, that's too bad.
He had some very unpleasant things to say about the original ThunderCats. I took him to task on it, and I think he ignored me.
Okay. That stinks. I mean, I really appreciate TenNapel's graphic novels. I was never like an Earthworm Jim fan. I just never bought it as a kid. But he has a really elastic drawing style that I appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
I guess he probably just doesn't like big over the top action stuff. He's a bit more of an abstract artist, I think, in how he thinks.
All right, now we're going to answer a few more questions here. Marmaduke did answer your question, Jeremy. He said his answer is that he doesn't have an answer.
Yeah, my answer is zero. Don't touch any of my old shows with your Steven Universe stuff.
No touch.
My nostalgia's best.
But anyways, let's see here. Any vehicles you guys would like? I want the Thunder Tank. I want the Thunder Tank. As far as giant robots goes, give me Genetic Gal-Gaigar and I'm set. Real quick here, you get to answer that in a minute here. I think yes. Jonah Arts. I'm an avid Gundam fan. I actually run the Gundam club in the city I live in. But go ahead, Marmaduke. You were asked any vehicles / giant robots would you like to have IRL?
I guess I'm gonna have to be old-fashioned and say like the Batman, the animated series Batmobile, because it's such a sleek-looking car.
Okay, so with all of those questions answered, we're going to go ahead and get ready to close out the show here. We're going to go ahead and discuss real quick what we're going to be talking about next time. Next month, we're going to be discussing the 6th episode of ThunderCats. See here, make sure I get this right, because I don't want to say it's the wrong episode, because I've done that before. It's going to be The Terror of Hammerhand, one of Marmaduke's favorites.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about The Terror of Hammerhand. We're going to be talking about ThunderCats Wildstorm number 3. And all right, chat, question time. What villain should we talk about next time?
And it looks like Jeremy also has a follow-up for you. He says, I asked Lio, and I think you can explain my question. Okay, I don't know what he's referring to, though. Okay, all right. That's referring back to when you said I didn't answer his question. Actually, I had thought, and Johnny Bravo might work because he's a character where, well, the problem is everything Johnny Bravo would do would be sexual harassment these days, even though the whole point is you're not supposed to be a sexual harasser. You're not supposed to be like Johnny Bravo. But I didn't like him as a kid. But then when you get a little older and you kind of realize what the point is that he looks like someone who should be, you know, a dreamboat. He's a little bit of Elvis Presley. He's a little bit of, you know, a bodybuilder, but he's just such a complete arrogant moron that, of course, he always falls flat on his face. And I think I care a lot about comedy because I think that good comedy, it's more than just like a fart joke. It ought to like have a point to it. And I think you could make that work in a cartoonier, modern Cartoon Network style.
Well, he says that wasn't the question, but he couldn't type it out. Oh, okay. Here's what he says. Do you think that evil people are born or created? Not bad people, evil people. When it comes to becoming evil or bad, does it happen more from nature or nurture?
All right. Well, here's the part where I get to preach. So I believe that human nature is fallen since Adam. We inherit Adam's sinful nature. That doesn't mean that everyone is as evil as they possibly can be. It means that every human being will commit, you know, sinful acts or will commit evil acts. I don't think. I think certain people are allowed to kind of like their heart is hardened. It's like how Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Certain people, they are allowed to kind of like express their desires fully. They're allowed to be as evil as they could possibly want. And the fact that we do good, that anyone does good, is sort of it's a mark of God's impression on our souls. You could say it's like we're reflecting the image of God. Even if you don't believe in God, you still understand the law of God and the goodness of God. And then I believe that people who are redeemed, then that's not like this. So like, it's not like I'm a better person. I'm a super duper good person. You're a super duper bad person. The only reason I can do anything good is really an act of God through me, that beyond any natural aspect of who I am.
Real quick, he's not saying bad people. He's saying evil people. He's talking about like Mumm-Ra-esque people.
Right. Right. So that would be like a person who's just given full vent to their like a Columbine shooter, right? That's true evil. So not everyone is like a Columbine shooter. Just because you sin, that doesn't automatically make you like a Columbine shooter, right?
I think they're created. I think it's by a choice. But real quick here, gonna address the chat here. Nether Witch, that's a good recommendation. However, here's a caveat and the problem here. In the cartoon, the Nether Witch was Mumm-Ra. It was just one of the forms he had taken to entrench himself into Third Earth lore. But in the comics, the Nether Witch was a completely separate character. And Marmaduke doesn't have access to the UK comics, which is what the ones she was featured in. Heck, I don't even have all of those. So unfortunately, we can't really talk about the Nether Witch right now. Grun, unfortunately, we covered him already. So somebody mentioned the Lunatics. You'd have to give us a specific Lunatac. So mention any of the Lunatics, and we'll probably cover it. So Lion Marmaduke, what do you think of new shows can learn? I think they can in terms of how to present morality. I think they can and how to present action shots, because I think they really suffer in the modern question. Real quick, stream dates due to art. That's going to pick up again in November because I have plans every single weekend for this month, all the way from cleaning out something this weekend to the end of October, to where I'm literally heading to Chicago.
Hey, cool.
But you can go ahead and answer the question too if you want to, Marmaduke.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is I believe that every artist learns by looking at past artists. And I think that's true if you're looking at painting. I think that's true if you're looking at writers and musicians. And I think that's true if you're looking at animation. So really look at everything through the lens of what is good about this and what do I not like about this? And then sort of ask, well, why do I like it? Why don't I like it? And maybe the tough one is, if I don't like it, but other people do like it, why do they like it? So that's what kind of taught me how to look at something I don't like that much, but figure out what could actually work in it. So if it's, I don't know, like a really girly, like Totally Spies cartoon that wasn't my jam, I could still like appreciate how slick the character design was, or the sense of humor from a show like that, and then I could imagine incorporating that into something new.
Sounds good. Scary Harpy recommended Chilla, and because we're covering issue 3 rather of the Wildstorm comics, and she shows up in there, I think that's a fine recommendation. So next time we're covering Chilla of the Lunatics.
Alrighty.
All right. Any other closing questions or concerns here before we get on out of here, Chad? I'll give you about 2 minutes.
Well, I've got one. You're completely wrong about your opinion on She-Ra, and I want a YouTube blood sport over it.
All right. Here's my response, my very intellectual response. Marmaduke, are you ready?
Yeah.
Fight me IRL.
I got a black belt. It didn't do me any good against my Marine friend, but I got one.
It's all right. I got a black belt too. It's where I hang my longsword. All right. Lio and Marmaduke. Well, you thought I was Lio, but it was really me, Dio.
Gosh, I've read a little JoJo. I'm gonna have to just sit down and read the rest of JoJo because the memes have been all over the place for JoJo.
Jeb Jam, I think we answered that question already.
Yeah, we covered that one.
Sorry, he may not have heard it, but let's see here. Jeremy, unfortunately, we're covering mostly ThunderCats villains because this is the ThunderCast. I know we got really off topic here, but it was a fun conversation. So let's see here. No, you see, I know, Couch Boys, that Marmaduke would know the response to that, and I was not about to set myself up. That's not how I operate. You got to understand the memes, and I'm already in certain circles called Boomer Convoy because I have a hard time with them. But
yeah,
yeah, JoJo is one of those series that is exactly what it says it is.
Bizarre,
a very bizarre adventure.
I didn't know this until I tried to read it, but some of it's hard to find because they started printing it like after the first story arc. So you start it kind of where it started to get popular. I guess it's a little bit about kind of like how they brought Dragon Ball Z to the States before they brought Dragon Ball to the States.
All right. So I think that's about it for now. I've given the chat its 2 minutes. So thank you all for joining us. And we'll be back again next month. For the record, it is the second Tuesday every month. Quality standard. It's really not Jonah Arts. Let me go ahead and answer that real quick. The quality and standard low and it's not low. The quality isn't low. The budget just hasn't kept consistent with what they can do now.
Yeah.
There's not as much money into it. Because if you actually compare Western animation to Japanese animation on a frame by frame basis, Japanese animation gets blown out of the water. Where they tend to excel is where we cut back on, and what we cut back on is, or what they cut back on is where we tend to excel.
Right.
But we'll go ahead and cover that more lately. So I'll catch everybody later. Thank you very much for joining us. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't, leave a comment, and hopefully we can find my buddy Marm here, his special some cat lady.
Or maybe just another guest on the ThunderCast. Someone to school me about He-Man.
Oh, it's all right. Tyler's joining us next time. He'll be able to school you. He'll school you.
Excellent.
Later, guys.
Later.